I wanted to invite Congresswoman Dingell, who has graciously given us some time to talk about some of the issues at the federal level and at the local level that impact on this conversation. So we're delighted that Debbie would take the time. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Well, Rip and Michael, who I really want to thank for his leadership, asked me if I'd sort of set the tone. And I guess you get asked to set the tone if you've been up here. I say to Matt Cullen, we are not old, we are seasoned. And I have probably had this discussion for more than 2 decades on Mackinac Island talking about transportation. But gang, the rubber hits the road, and never has there been a more serious time for this discussion. So I thank Michael and Paul and Rip and everybody, and Matt, who's finally seen M1, all those of you who want to swear when you're downtown at those long lines, something's actually about to happen and become a reality in downtown. But we're at a critical path. The Highway Trust Fund expires on May 31st. Some people didn't want to extend it. You can't play games with highway funds. It's too important. Our highways are the key to economic development. We just saw how the Michigan voter feels with the ballot proposal that was too complicated, and they sent a message to everybody. They want straight skinny. If you talk to everybody, you look at the polling, they say they want better roads. 38% of the roads in Michigan are in bad condition. Some are in dangerous condition. We could have a bridge collapse at any time. We've got to do something about it. We have to do it at the federal level, where we've got a highway trust fund that is got less money going into it because, thanks to the great ingenuity and technology of the American auto industry, people are traveling more miles but buying less gas, less money's going into it. How do we make it as an issue that it's part of the national dialogue so that this country doesn't ultimately become a third world country? And in Michigan, in a year and a half, we're going to have a ballot proposal in Southeast Michigan that's going to decide the future of regional transportation. And you just saw what happened in Michigan at the beginning of May. We all have to help the gentlemen on this stage, and there are women working with them too, so that may be another reason why, because we're going to have another disaster. I mean, Michael is coming from a county that there are people in Washington County I talk to every day that are like, why are we part of southeastern Michigan? Why do we have to care about this? We all have to care about it. And it's time that we've got to start this grassroots campaign. And we have to say to the legislators, it's not a Republican pothole. It's not a Democratic pothole. We are Michiganians. We are Americans who have to have an infrastructure that is at the foremost of what's happening in the world. And the people in this room have to get that grassroots coalition going so that people are talking about it, they understand it, and that we find the solutions. American people and Michiganians, Michiganders want people to work together to find the solutions. Compromise isn't a bad word. We need to make transportation and transit the #1 issue in Michigan so that everybody does well. Economic development and equal opportunity. People get to the jobs. So, thank you. Set the tone.
I wish we could find some issues where we could get her a little bit wound up. It's that flatness is disturbing. Thank you, Debbie. I'm here really to get out of the way. This is an extraordinary panel, and we need to turn to them immediately. Let me just say, though, that it seems to me that when we think about this issue, I think Debbie is absolutely right. I mean, you gotta land on some nuts and bolts, bread and butter things, but this is a system we're trying to create. And I think what I hope the panel is going to be talking about are some of the elements of that system, the importance of the system working as a system, as an integrated whole, the importance of thinking about it as a regional proposition, not as one locality sort of squaring off against another, all of the things that Debbie mentioned. And I think the very good news is that you have 3 folks together with Paul who are systems thinkers. This is all about how we construct something that can endure over time, how it can be funded properly, how it can be operated properly, and how it actually begins to create the kind of connective tissue that we've all hoped for in the region for a long time. So with that, let me introduce Paul. I mean, this is a particular point of privilege for me because one of the reasons I came to Michigan 8 or 9 years ago was because I sat in a room with Paul Hillegonds, who was a trustee of the Kresge Foundation, and who proceeded to ask the most thoughtful, probing, understated questions I had up to that point experienced. He is a remarkable leader in this community. We're, I think, triply blessed. Not only is he a Kresge trustee, which just makes Kresge smarter every day, but he is also, and not only is he the chair of the Regional Transit Authority, but he's just been appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, which I think will be making more and more news over these next months as it gets up and running in a more aggressive way. Paul was introduced to me as a former Speaker of the House, but when you actually look at his resume, there is sort of no aspect of Michigan community life that he hasn't touched. It's just extraordinary. From serving on the Nature Conservancy Board, to the Wayne State Board, to Grand Valley Board, I think, Paul, I can't remember. No? Yes? Yeah? Yeah, he led Detroit Renaissance. I mean, it's very difficult not to find Paul's extraordinarily positive and helpful fingerprints on almost everything we do in Southeast Michigan. So let me turn it over to one of the really great Michiganders, Paul Hillegonds.
Thank you. Thank you, Rip, for your overly kind contribution and introduction to today's program. I want to start out with a couple of comments and then make introductions of our panel, and we'll get right into my questions, and then we hope to have questions from you today. First, just a little context. As Rip noted, I am the chair, the non-voting chair of the Regional Transit Authority, my position appointed by the governor, but I still get a lot of questions about what's the Regional Transit Authority. We are a board of 10. 9 are appointed by the county leadership, Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw, and by the city of Detroit. And this Regional Transit Authority wouldn't have been possible but for decades of effort. In fact, 23 failed attempts at creating a Regional Transit Authority. And the Detroit Regional Chamber has been one of the champions throughout this period. And I just want to express my thanks to the Chamber for your advocacy, to you as members for your advocacy of finally a Regional Transit Authority. It would not have been possible for this to pass the legislature, but for M1 Rail, which is not part of the RTA. But when M1 Rail, with private backing, sought federal support, the federal FTA and U.S. Department of Transportation said, we are interested in supporting M1 Rail, but it can't stand alone. We want it to be part of something bigger and more comprehensive. And so if we are going to support the M1 Rail, we want to see state legislation creating a Regional Transit Authority. And thanks has to go to Governor Snyder as well, who championed that cause in the legislature and finally made it possible. But the legislature, I think, probably wouldn't have acted positively but for the advocacy, the united advocacy of the mayor of the city of Detroit and the county executives of Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and the County Board of Commissioners of Washtenaw County. That gives me optimism for what we're about, what we're going to be talking about today, that we have that kind of regional leadership support, as well as the support which has been constant of the business community. We will talk about why this is so important, but most of us, I think, heard Doris Kearns-Goodwin this morning, and as she talked about the importance of storytelling. I assume most of us have read the story of James Robertson, who, in order to get to his job in Oakland County, sometimes would walk to and from his job, along with taking buses sporadically, as much as 21 miles. And that compelling story really is a story of how far we have to go in creating comprehensive regional transit in our region. It's not only about economic development, and every growing region has a strong transit system. It's a talent attractor today. You ask millennials, you know, what's important about quality of life? Usually transit, access to transit is in the top 5 reasons. But it's also about opportunity, sharing in economic growth. And it's about access to jobs, access to health care. We've heard at this conference, access to schools, and our cultural amenities. And here's the story of our region today. Brookings recently did an analysis of the top 100 metro regions in the country. Job sprawl in Metro Detroit is greater than any of the other 99 regions. 77% of us are more than 10 miles and as far as 35 miles from our jobs, where we live to our jobs. And when it comes to access to transit, when you think of those long commutes, Brookings also notes that only 22% of the jobs in Southeast Michigan are accessible by a bus ride of less than 90 minutes. Think about that. So it's about economic growth. It's about access and opportunity to a growing economy that we'll be talking about today. We have a terrific panel. I first want to introduce Carlos Monje, the Assistant Secretary of Transportation for Policy at the U.S. Department of Transportation. Carlos not only has led policy at the Department of Transportation, he served as Special Assistant to President Obama and Chief of Staff of the White House Domestic Policy Council. Carlos flew into Detroit yesterday, couldn't get up because of weather, and drove himself up last night to be here. Carlos, thank you so much. Go ahead. Next, at the far end, Michael Ford, who gives me great joy every day as the CEO of the Regional Transit Authority. The board went for at least a year before we finally identified a CEO who is really top flight. Michael has experience running and consulting with transit agencies in Portland, Oregon, and Seattle, Washington. Most recently served as the CEO of the Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority, where he not only built a successful system, but earned the support over 70% of the voters of Washtenaw County to increase funding for that system. Michael, you're doing a great job for us. Welcome.
Thank you.
And finally, Peter Varga, CEO of the RAPID, which is the Grand Rapids interurban system. Peter has been leading the system since, I think, 1997. Peter, and has built not only a great partnership between municipalities in the Grand Rapids region, but most recently can boast succeeding at getting public funding, public support for the first bus rapid transit line in the entire state of Michigan, the Silver Line, which is going to prove to be a very important part of the Grand Rapids economy and again provides access to opportunity in Grand Rapids. Peter, thank you for being with us today. So we'll get right to the questions, and my first question will be to Carlos, Mr. Secretary. The U.S. Department of Transportation, as I've noted already, has placed a great deal of emphasis on investing in transit around the country, but you've had a special interest. You've gone to great lengths to support transit in Detroit. And that started with M1 Rail, but you've been a wonderful supporter providing planning dollars for the RTA. Why? What is the reason for your interest in Detroit metro area especially?
Well, the administration has been a long-time supporter of transit, start globally and then finish up in Detroit. It's by necessity. You know, Secretary Fox, who's my boss, is a former mayor of Charlotte. He is a very impatient man, which if you've ever met a mayor anywhere, it's always true. He wanted us to come up with a vision of what the United States is going to look like in 2045. And it shouldn't be surprising to anybody. 70 million more people, 45% more freight on our networks. It's going to be a very congested system. Right now, the average commuter spends 40 hours a year. It's stuck in traffic, in congestion that they could be spending with their families, on the job. It's a tremendous drain on our economy. And roads are an incredibly important piece of the puzzle, but then they're not the only piece. And by necessity, you got to have more efficiency with the capacity that we have. And that's why transit gets cars off the road, gets a lot more people moving a lot more efficiently. Second is opportunity. Transportation costs are the second most expensive part of a family's budget, second to housing, and low-income folks spend 10% of their income just getting to work. And transit really is a lifeline for those folks. A lot of folks don't have an alternative, and for folks who rely on a car, it's very expensive for low-income folks, more than 40% of their budgets. The other is economic development. You've seen in Detroit already, even before M1 starts running, just all sorts of new development that's cropping up along that corridor. And that's true all across the country. You've seen bus rapid transit lines really driving economic development. Environmental, you know, the transit takes cars off the road, which means that there's less pollution, which is extremely valuable. And in terms of Detroit, it's because the president told us. We didn't really have an option. You know, he said Detroit is special, and he and the vice president really have invested a lot of personal energy in this, and it's really flowed from the top. And you mentioned James Robertson's story. That's something that when it came out in the Free Press, we sent it to Secretary Fox, and we debated whether it was possible that somebody would actually go through this. And the more we found out about it, it's really a demonstration of the challenges not unique to Detroit, but certainly have been very hard here, especially in coming out of the bankruptcy. And so we saw it not only as something that needed to be done, but there have been a group of people, I was at the White House before, who were focused on how do we make the government a better partner. FEMA's gotten a lot better at working disasters, natural disasters, and getting the government all on the same page, but we're a lot worse at it when there isn't a big fire. And so Detroit is not only an opportunity to help, but also to demonstrate that we want to do things better. And I think the things that you talked about, the incredible progress that's been happening on the ground, that we're grateful to have been a part of, and pushing for RTA and funding M1 and funding 80 new buses for the city of Detroit, literally thousands of hours of technical assistance to try to keep things moving. We're very proud of our participation here, and transit is key, and it's really great to see the momentum that's happening on the ground.
Thanks. Michael, you're out every day, I know, talking with stakeholders, citizens, about how they feel about existing transit, what they hope for. And can you tell all of us who are here today what you're engaged in with the process of visioning, sure, planning, and ultimately implementing transit?
Sure. Yeah, I'm hearing from folks every day. I'm out. I've done probably about 20 listening sessions, and I've got tons more to do. But people are ready for change. They want to see transportation for their kids, for themselves, for their loved ones, just to get it to a ball game, or to get to dinner and be able to get back home, or just to get to work and get back home. Some people are, straddled with not even being able to get to work, and then they lose their job because they don't have transportation. Or if you don't have a car, you can't get that job. So these are real stories that I hear often. And those are the kind of things that we want to address. I mean, this is about, this is not a dress rehearsal. We really got to get something done here. Transportation is huge to this region. And if we don't do anything, we're going to be further behind. And that's why we need a plan. We need a vision forward that we're working on right now. We've been outreaching and engaging. We heard that we had a kickoff last week in all 4 counties in the city. We're continuing to move forward for the next 3 months. We're going to be out. And we need your involvement. We need your participation to help us make sure that we can build a plan that's realistic, that will meet your needs, and that has what's necessary for now and well into the future. So our focus right now for the next 3 months will be outreach and engagement. We plan to be back in September, October with meat on the bones to say this is what we've been able to come up with based on a lot of the input. We need folks from the universities, business communities, social service agencies, and just common folks just weighing in on the needs for the elderly and the disabled, millennials wanting to be able to go to events and be able to live where they work. It's critically important. So our focus is really coming up a regional plan that makes sense for you, also with a funding mechanism as well. We got to invest. We don't invest enough in transportation here. About $74 per capita here versus on average about $184. That's on average. So we've got to think about where we want to go. And I submit to you, doing nothing is not an option. So for the next several months, we'll be out. We'll be coming back to you with a plan. And then we're going to be out, getting your support because there is a pending millage that we're going to need to address for funding. And we're going to need your support. So that's where we're at. I invite you to get engaged. We have a website, rtamichigan.org. We'll have lists of different events that we're going to be having. But we're not just having events. We're going to be using interactive media, technology, and getting on the buses and engaging people, hearing what they have to say, which is really critically important.
Could you just elaborate a little bit on our dual roles, at least 2, but one is enhance transit, and the other is coordination with existing local providers. And I anticipate a question we'll get from the audience about coordination.
It's all about coordination and seamlessness. People should be able to get on a system and be able to get where they want to go and be able to do that very easily. So our focus is really coordination between systems, efficiencies, effective service, getting you where you need to be and when you need to be where you want to go. I didn't say that right, did I? My point is that you should be able to get anywhere you want to go in this county. Fast, efficient, safe, having reliable services. And that's what we're really focused on. So the plan will help us with that. And the other thing I also say about the plan, it's not just about getting you from point A to point B, but it's the wayfinding, it's the real-time information, it's the shelters, it's all the things that make good transportation work for everybody. So those are the kind of things that we're committed to making happen. We've got a small staff, but we've got a large heart, and we're ready to do what we've got to do to make it work.
Thanks. And Peter, thank you for being with us, and what you've done in Grand Rapids is an inspiration, and you offer some lessons to us. You opened the bus rapid transit line last year. How long did it take to get to that point? What is bus rapid transit? How is it different from rail? And how is it different from conventional buses? And what results have you seen so far?
Okay, that's a good question. Well, it's really a short story, but a long story, because we started back in 2000 by creating the authority to move forward. And at that point, we didn't really envision BRT that much. We had a transit system that shut service down at 6 o'clock in the evening, that barely worked on Saturday, that didn't run on Sunday. It really did not support the business community's need for getting people to jobs. So that was the first step in building that network of routes and services that really expanded into the evening and expanded frequencies and made ridership grow. At one point, we were being encouraged to look at a major investment in public transit. And you look at everything, and in our communities, we looked at alternative modes, and I think the big one we were weighing was light rail versus bus rapid transit. We didn't have the kind of density and population that really suited light rail, but it suited bus rapid transit. We looked at 10 corridors and found the one corridor which had the most promise for economic development, and we focused on it. Paul, that took a long time. Because at that point, the federal government was looking at even these small projects as if they were a new start process, as if they were a light rail project, and it took us, frankly, years. You not only need a big heart, as Michael said, you need a lot of perseverance. You have to be dogged. You have to keep at it to do it. Eventually, we did get entry into project development back in '98, but it took us 4 years to get to the point where we actually got the grant agreement. Things have changed with this administration. Things are really moving faster, I think, on those kinds of projects. So there's a lot of promise in that. The BRT is like light rail. It moves as fast as light rail. It moves on the same schedule. We have a 9.8-mile corridor. It wouldn't matter if we put light rail in our BRT, we'd have the same success in ridership. So BRT is 10 times cheaper than building light rail in a community for which it is suited. That was very logical. We got a combination between state and federal funds. State was 20%, $39 million to do this project. I want to tell you, we finished it not only ahead of time. We started at the date that we said we would because we keep our promises, but we were $5 million under budget. And that's also something that you have to do, is you have to pay attention to all those issues in great detail to pull it off. Our vision was really to create a network of BRTs. So we've worked on our second study. We're probably going to move into project development, I hope, here in 40 days or so, which starts opening the green light to building the next system. Why is BRT like light rail? Well, the BRT bus moves into a station. It's level boarding, so somebody can actually wheel a wheelchair on the bus from a level boarding platform without any ramps. When the bus appears, all the doors open, people get in and out and board real quickly. All the ticket buying is not done at a fare box, it's done at a ticket vending machine at the station. At the station, you have next bus announcements that tell you when the next bus will come. So if it's either 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 35 minutes, it tells you in real time. And we have Wi-Fi on the buses, so it has all this kind of elements of what rail would look like. It's not very dissimilar for standing on a platform in Washington, D.C., even for the subway. And you're on a bus system that really works effectively and efficiently to get people to work, mostly in the core concentration of downtown, where about $3 billion of mostly health-related businesses got developed. Division is our main corridor we're going through. It's the old US 131. It went into decline just like Route 66 when they built the highways. There is a lot of potential for economic development. That's what we're counting on. We're starting to see the seeds of that with new retail and housing developing. And I think it takes years. It takes about 8 years before you get that concentration. But I think Paul will be really successful at showing that BRT is not only good for getting people to work, it's good for business, it's also good for economic development and stimulates that.
Carlos, you've not only been a great partner to us in Metro Detroit, but USDOT, it's my understanding, provided over half the capital funds for the Silver Line in Grand Rapids.
And I didn't know you guys had Wi-Fi. We don't have Wi-Fi on the Metro in DC. That's pretty good.
Well, our millennials are very insistent.
Assuming we're going to support locally, you need to see local support before you get involved.
That's right.
The millage had to pass in Grand Rapids. But how does the federal government look at funding major transit projects? What do you look for? It's a competitive process, correct?
Yeah, and well, let me talk about the project, the program that I'm most familiar with, which is Tiger. Tiger is a program that my team runs. Most federal funding goes out via formula, but in recent years we've seen a movement towards a bigger role for DOT to decide the merits of different projects. New Starts was one that Peter mentioned, has a very defined system that requires more of you as you go further along the lines. Tiger is a discretionary grant program. It's put out $4.1 billion since 2009. It was a child of the Recovery Act, and we get every year just a tsunami of requests. Last year was $15 worth of requests for every $1 that we can spend, and that's actually gone down since the beginning when we had closer to 30 to 1. And so these are extremely competitive projects. People really put their best foot forward. I know Grand Rapids is coming in for another Tiger request this year. Some of the things we look at are economic competitiveness, quality of life, environmental sustainability, state of good repair, just meaning are you building back what was there, and then safety. So those are our primary criteria. After that is innovation and partnership. And those last pieces are really important. We're looking for the most interesting projects that are going to be a model for the rest of the nation. Your first BRT line in Michigan. We're also looking for partnerships that otherwise wouldn't get to the table. We've seen, because of Tiger, people who even don't get funding end up going ahead and coming together for really good projects. The bike share network in DC is actually expanded despite the fact that they didn't get a Tiger grant. And what we're looking at, it's a really arduous process, and we want to make sure that we're good stewards of federal dollars. We want to make sure the environmental pieces are there. Incredibly arduous process, and important, because it's not just about the environment, it's about also helping, making sure that we're serving the communities that are being served. And also the historic pieces, the funding. Is the dollar, are the dollars really committed at that local level? Are the partners going to step up to the table? One of the hardest parts of the Tiger program has been, recalcitrant railroads. They don't necessarily want you to have the right of way, and some of the challenges we've had to overcome there. And then the schedule, is it something that's realistic? And so we're looking at all those things, and we have the luxury of picking from the cream of the crop, but it also demonstrates pretty significant need. We are year after year begging Congress to give us funding for Tiger, and every year at the very last minute we get it. And Congresswoman was mentioning the surface transportation bill is in jeopardy now. It used to be decade after decade you could rely on Congress in a pretty bipartisan way to fund transportation, and we just we've struggled. And I think the real way to break through that is to demonstrate the value of these projects, and to be able to have the folks who are making those tough votes to raise funding understand what it means on the ground. And so looking at the projects, looking at some of the things that RTA is trying to put on the ground here, and seeing the success of M1 when it gets rolling next year, I think is going to help build that momentum and hopefully get something done.
I should add here that the U.S. Department has been a great partner, but so has the Michigan Department of Transportation. It was one thing to get the RTA Act passed, but to have funding to even begin to hire staff, we needed operational support, which the MDOT Michigan Department has largely provided, along with some legislative support. We appreciate the legislatures helping out. And the governor's office and MDOT did provide interim staff to us before we were able to hire our own staff. So many thanks for that. Michael, one of the most important issues at the conference is accelerating Detroit's redevelopment, and not just in the core city, but throughout our neighborhoods in Detroit. Do you see regional transit as relevant to that discussion?
Absolutely. Regional transit can't work without good local service and regional service working together. It's a symbiotic relationship. So the answer is definitely yes. You heard from many other people, economic development, job creation, all these things are stimulated through good networks and good transportation. Personally, I've had experience when I was running rail and bus in Portland. We started up new lines in different areas, and you just saw the boom that took place with good service in neighborhoods. So I can talk directly about it because I was part of that. So it's real, and it makes a difference. It stimulates, it creates jobs, creates a better environment for the area. Property values go up, and all kinds of things are just move forward from that. So when I think about regional transportation, the neighborhoods, between neighborhoods, and neighborhoods into the cities, and I'm looking at suburbs and all this, it has to happen all together. It all has to be this symbiotic relationship that works. So to the question, it's really important that neighborhoods get taken care of because they will want to feed to major trunk lines. And beside what we're doing right now, or this concept, we're also working on Gratiot, Michigan, and Woodward Avenue, along with a regional master plan. And we're also looking at putting out some airport service here fairly soon as well. So we are trying to do a few things. As we plan, we also want to get some appetizers out there to make a difference. So coupled with good neighborhood service, regional service will be well dealt with because it has those connections.
Thanks. Peter, I understand you were chair of the American Public Transit Association during your career, and so you had kind of a national view of what's going on around the country. What can we learn here in Michigan from other regions and what you've seen in your experience at the national level?
Well, there's a lot of places in the United States that have shown success, that have started from not much to really great stuff. I give you an example. Dallas was as car-oriented a society as any, and it has the most light rail miles of any city in the United States. A little bit of it was, well, they wanted to outdo Houston, but it worked, So there are areas. I think you're looking at a situation in which local, state, and national become very important. When I first started in Grand Rapids, I said you'd never pass a property tax for transit, and we've passed 4 since 2000. So you can do it. Then the state becomes very important. The state has been a very good partner to us, very consistent. I mean, they sat with money for us for the BRT while the federal government was going through its process. That's real patience. And, and it was with great pleasure that we saw the governor there doing the groundbreaking. Actually, it was raining. We were in a Beltline bar, a Mexican restaurant, and he was inside the restaurant pretending to break up the floor. So you need the state, and then you need this national support. And I think it's really, you can't do it without the balance of knowing that the local support is there to support the initiatives. The federal government needs to know that they're going to have some feeling that this is really going to work, and you have to sell them the story and really in real detail with technical stuff. And then the state stands ready to help you. I think this has proven to me in Michigan that it's possible. I've seen it, and I think we'll see it again. And I think, I'm thinking that this is the best time for Detroit. It is really the best time. The M1 rail is going to be a game changer. It's going to indicate to people that there was something that should have happened here years ago, but it's happening now. It's moving forward. And so these other initiatives, yes, it's a struggle to get a lot of different constituencies together behind a plan. But I tell you, I'm in a community where you have a core Democratic city and Republican suburbs, and they've done it. I say, don't think that nothing's impossible. Always think something's possible. And as like Yoda says, there is no try, there is just do.
My last question then, and I think we have some questions. If you haven't filled out a card and want to ask questions, please do. But Congresswoman Dingell, my friend Debbie, did remind us that we have work to do on fixing roads and funding those roads in the legislature. And I guess I need to ask, especially Michael and Peter, is that ongoing debate about transportation funding, which, by the way, not only includes roads, but support for local transit agencies like the Ann Arbor system, SMART, and DDOT, is that ongoing debate an obstacle to moving ahead with a 2016 vote on regional transit here in Southeast Michigan?
No, I think it's important. Regional transportation is critical, so are roads, and they have to be working together. But I think everybody understands that you have to make an investment. If you don't keep up your house, if you don't keep up your car, what happens? It doesn't work for you. And I don't think anybody will argue with that. I think one thing that we are learning from this process is we've got to be clear about our message. We've got to tell you what's in the plan. It's got to meet your needs, how much it's going to cost, and what's going to do, and when it's going to be delivered to you. Those are, common elements that have to be part of that. So clarity of message, understanding the community, what the needs are, but also being able to get something done. What can we do year one? What can we do year two? What's going to take a little bit longer, but being clear about that. So I think it's about investment. And again, I don't want to shy away from this. We are going to have to invest if we're going to make changes. If we don't do anything today, we're going to be further and further behind. And I just don't think that's acceptable in the 21st century. We've got to do something. So infrastructure, roads, transit, really symbiotic relationship. I think we've got to be clear about our message. And I think that's what we're tasked to do, and that's what we're going to do, because we're going to need your support in this room to make this happen.
Peter, thoughts?
Well, transportation is really, you were talking about mobility. We're talking about moving people. We're talking about moving people in different ways. And you cannot do it if you're only thinking about the automobile, because that leads to sprawl and uncontrolled growth, right? And then you have two populations that are very like-minded, strangely. The millennials and the baby boomers are like-minded. They want to have mobility options. It's not a question anymore. You need to be able to walk. You need to have communities in which you can walk, which is also mobility and transportation money. You need bicycles, you need cars, you need car sharing, and you need public transit to all work together. And it's not one over the other. It's everything has to work together well. So that's really what transportation is. We talk about it, it's mobility. It's managing the mobility of people. And it becomes very crucial that we understand that this is the direction not only baby boomers are going in, but millennials. They want those choices, and they're going to drive those choices. And the way they're going to drive it is by moving away from communities that don't give them those options. And they're going to go to communities where that works better. Why does Grand Rapids and Detroit have an advantage? Because the cost of living is reasonable. It's not outside of the realm. So you don't have to go to those cities where those mobility options are there, but millennials won't move there because that's putting them into the poverty level. And this is why we have these opportunities now to provide those mobility choices for people. So it has to be roads, it has to be transit, it has to be bicycle and pedestrian things. And there's investment from the federal government and the state needs to see it holistically, not singularly.
Okay, now it's your turn, and I only have one card. I see you're still collecting, so don't want to cut off questions you may have, but this is one of the most commonly asked questions, so it's appropriate it's the first. And I would direct this to Michael, will the current SMART, DDOT, and Ann Arbor Area Transit Authority be rolled into one merged system under RTA? Is that the plan?
I think what we need to think about is service and getting people connected and having seamless service. I think that could be an incremental approach at some point, but I think right now, as you go out and see what's going on, people need to be served. We need to have a plan to make that happen. And I think that the issue is having connections between systems that are on time, that are reliable, that are making a difference is where our focus is at. This other stuff, administratively, I think can be looked at, but I think right now our critical mass is making a difference, changing the trajectory of how people think about transportation and having more reliable systems.
And I would add, you look at the more comprehensive systems around the country. Many regions have multiple local providers, but they just are integrated the way you've suggested,
Absolutely.
Michael. Could you give us some examples, though, of the kind of coordination issues that are being looked at? The RTA, under the law, has a Providers Advisory Council. So we have regular meetings of the representatives of the local systems working together on how they can better coordinate. We also now, under the law, are the federally designated recipient of dollars and also from the state. So the support dollars for the local systems now flow through us, and potentially we have the ability down the road to force more coordination if we can't get cooperative coordination, frankly. But we're working on cooperation right now.
Cooperation. You know, there's an ordinance that has been in place for a number of years between drop-off and pickups in the city of Detroit, and we're currently working on seeing what we can do to help bridge that gap between DDOT and SMART. That's one example I can point to right now. There's much more work to be done there. Another is a regional fare card. Seamlessness, being able to access different transportation providers with one card is critically important in the 21st century. And being able to have that kind of ability to use it, to be able to swipe and get onto another system and not having to figure out what this system says or what that system says. Ultimately, that's something that we're currently working on, and we're hoping to maybe able to do a demonstration sometime later out in this year or early next year. So those are things right now. We're continuing to meet regularly. We're having discussions with the CEOs. How can we work together? How can the plans that we're creating, they're not just the RTA plans, but they're encompassing SMART and DDOT and how that can work together, because we all have to have one plan that's going to work for all of us. And we are also wanting to make sure that all the information that comes in to a given agency, that you can go to one location and get the information. But we have to coordinate that kind of discussion. So the end user is going to benefit, so you're not having to go to 3 or 4 different systems to figure out how do I navigate here, how do I go here. So those things are currently in effect right now that we're working on. We got more work to do along with trying to get this master plan done, but it all has to integrate, it all has to work together. So those are the things we're working on right now.
And just a corollary to the question on coordination that came in, the question was, instead of thinking about another system, enhanced bus rapid transit, why not just fix the local systems we have? Another way of asking that may be, why have regional transit? Why not just have the local providers improve service?
Well, I think we've seen how service is working right now, and it's not working well. You need to have some point agency to help move that forward. We are giving that power and authority, and I think at the end of the day, people aren't being served the way they could be. If it takes you 2 hours to get to work, if it takes you, an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to the airport, does that really make sense? We're in a very progressive age, and I think there's more we can do. So our coordination efforts are to streamline, to improve, to enhance, to provide efficiencies. We don't want Swiss cheese transit. We need transit that works effectively for all of us here. So our efforts will be really focused in on that, and that's why the plan is critically important, because you have to have a vision, got to know where you're going to get there. And again, there are going to be incremental steps, and there are going to be longer-term focuses that we're going to have. But it's a critical point, and that's why we need your input, we need your involvement, because without that, the plan's not going to be realistic, and it's not going to be doable. So those of you in this room, we need your involvement. There are ways to get involved, and there's information in the back, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it's a critical time. It really is here.
And another interesting thing about the law, we can support lines that cross county lines, but we have no opt-out provision. Unlike the SMART system, everyone's in if we get regional support. And so we can connect areas that aren't participating today in regional transit. Peter, question on the Rapid. It sounds pretty close in operation to light rail. How do you maintain your schedules with the normal highway backups, slowdowns, traffic jams? Can you really keep a real-time schedule with bus rapid transit?
Yeah, you can, except for the city's construction projects. The schedule really works really well until you have a road situation where they're building a new intersection or removing sewer. we've had delays on our route BRT when the city was doing that. When the city's not doing that, it really works like clockwork. It goes in sequence. It's those interruptions. What is really genius about that, if the cities don't mess up the BRT line, the congestion on 131 always occurs anyway. So people can start seeing that is more regular, and that is something that they don't want. That kind of congestion is not what they want. But if it wasn't for the cities actually making construction work in the BRT corridor, there is no problem. I think that you would face that with any kind of transportation mode. You would with the streetcar too, the M1 rail.
A question on race. How big a factor is race in the politics of building a system? Another similar question, how do you get buy-in from suburban communities not interested in having public transportation stops in their neighborhoods from urban centers? And I throw that out to any of you who have had probably experiences with this issue.
I really don't think it's about race. I don't. I mean, you have concentrations of certain kind of communities in Grand Rapids, you know, where the African Americans live, where the Hispanics live. It's not a question of race. I think when you're talking about cities, it's a question of equity. It's a question of equity between incomes, between communities, between what the Republicans want and what the Democrats want. They'd like to see equal service. And so I don't think it's anything about race. It's really about equity. It's making sure that everybody has fair access.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, you know, I've talked to folks out there and different areas, and what I hear is people just want to know what's in it for them. They want to understand, if I put my investment into something, what am I going to get in return? And is it going to help me or my constituents or my area? So I think the other thing is you got to get out and talk to people. There's a lot of folklore out there. I'm not saying there's not race issues. I'm not saying there aren't problems out there. But when you have a face-to-face discussion, you're talking to people, I think that goes a long way in bridging a relationship and a connection. And sometimes I don't think that always happens. And what I'm finding is when you get out there, there's more commonality than differences. And people can appreciate getting where they want to go. They're looking at their community in the future. We have no young people. We have an older population. What does that mean for the next 5 years for us? What are we going to do? We've got to figure a way to attract people. If millennials are wanting to use transportation, then we are not part of that, then what's going to happen to us? So those are the kind of things that I'm hearing more about how can we think about our future, where are we going, where do we want to be, and how do we get into the game?
If I could, Secretary Fox definitely sees the history and the social ways that infrastructure is built over time. He talks about, if you look at any culture throughout history, the infrastructure reflects its values, and the way Rome was built was designed to get people to Rome and where the pyramids are. And in his experience in Charlotte growing up, a highway dividing his neighborhood from the opportunities of downtown, how hard it was to get a pizza delivered in his neighborhood because people refused to cross that divide. So it's hard to separate the two, and the suburban-urban division is particularly acute here in Detroit, but it's certainly not unique. And I think we've done a lot at USDOT to help provide local governments with tools to overcome that. I think a lot of that comes with money. People will work together if there's money involved. The other is being able to make the case with data. We've been leading an effort at DOT to help folks who want to do it use data to figure out how their networks are helping connect people where they need to go. Not just the speed of traffic, not just how many people are getting on the bus, but how well does it serve the system. And data really helps, but it doesn't replace the kind of outreach that RTA is doing. It can be an important tool. You can demonstrate progress. You can hold people accountable. But you need the money and you need to talk to people.
A couple of more questions, and I'll try and group these, Michael, and this gets into the planning. How is RTA working with the current Amtrak system to coordinate service? And in Detroit, what's the last mile, well, in Detroit and the suburbs, what's the last mile solution off main routes into neighborhoods?
Well, I think we obviously want to be able to look at everything. I think Peter hit it well. You're talking about mobility options and how do we make that work. we're in the planning process. We want input. We want suggestions. So I don't want to be presumptuous about saying how that's going to work. But obviously, having good neighborhood services that will connect you to a main line is going to be critically important for people to want to ride service. We also, you know, we have this kind of thing about people riding because that's the only way they, you know, can have the mobility that they need. But we want to be able to attract new riders. We want to be able to change the trajectory of how people think about transportation. So there are things that we need to do to make that happen. So in terms of the last mile, I think having better neighborhood services, neighborhood-to-neighborhood services, recognizing that's really an important component to having good transportation. To fix, in some areas you may not need a 40-foot bus. You may need a smaller bus that makes the rounds, that picks up people and collects them to a major trunk line. I think those are things that we can do. People want to be able to walk to get to where they want to go. You know, there's places, I guess, in these areas where there's no sidewalks. You might want to fix those and make those more accessible to people. We want people who are elderly and disabled to have mobility and freedom. They want to be able to age in place. So having good transportation and making that work takes, I guess the other thing I would say is that we need to be relevant and we have to continue to be nimble in understanding our community. That means always understanding, always going out, always talking to people. This plan that we're doing is a plan, and we need to exercise it, but it needs to be relevant. We need to always continuing to get input, seek, to make sure that we're meeting the different needs that are happening and the changes that are happening every day. We just heard about how millennials are. When, you know, I was growing up, you want your car. But, you know, that's not the society anymore. So we got to continue to have our noggin on the pulse of things to make sure that we're being relevant and we can make sure that the transportation that we're providing now and into the future are going to be meeting those needs that we're going to continue to hear about.
There was a quick question. What's the millage rate request going to be?
Right now, we are assimilating a plan, and we're getting input. And I don't want to presuppose what that's going to look like right now. We have to get input. We have to know what you want, and we're going to have to be able to look at that and then give that back to you and then ask you what's realistic. What's the threshold? What are you willing to invest to make transportation work in this region? And that's really a critical question. So this whole effort about the next 3 months and getting input is going to be really critical to come back to you and say, did we get it right? Does this make sense to you? And are you willing to invest in this? That's where we're at right now. So I would not want to even characterize a figure at this point.
And final question, how can we in the audience, thank you, help get engaged to get a millage passed in 2016, and how can a coalition of communities help with that effort too?
Stay involved. Our website is rtamichigan.org. We'll have a list of activities. We're continuing to meet with people, doing listening sessions, going out. I talked about being on the bus, doing polling. We'll continue to update you, and if you need us to be at some place to give a presentation or to direct us somewhere else, that somebody else we should meet and talk to, we're happy to do that. We need your input to make this effective. So stay engaged on our website. There are other materials that we have handed out in the back there, and just let us know what you're thinking and what you want to see in this plan, because it's critically important at this time.
Can I, because
yes.
I'm not allowed out of the building without mentioning the Grow America Act. This is a critical time for national funding. Congress just passed the 33rd short-term extension. It used to be you get 6 years at a time in major growth, and it's hard to plan if you're a state or an MPO or a regional transit if you don't know how much money is going to be there. And we're seeing state after state scale back or try to figure out other ways to get local funding to fill in the gap. But unless the feds are there, it's going to be really hard to do it, and we need Congress to act. You guys tell the story a lot better than we can.
Thank you. I should add at the end here, in addition to the Providers Advisory Council that we have a Citizens Advisory Committee. Former Chair Brian Sadek is here, and some 50 citizens from around the region are participating on a regular basis, helping with the planning, helping get communication out, but we need all of you. One last thought. I couldn't help hear and think about Darren Walker's comments today on the panel of the Grand Bargain. He claimed to be an outsider, maybe an honorary Detroiter, but he said his perception is that we still have a legacy to deal with of a region divided by race and a region separated between city and suburbs. Well, I'm a relative newcomer too. I'm 18 years in Southeast Michigan, and I think that we have made great progress as a region. We're thinking more regionally. RTA is one example of that. And here is my vision, here's my passion for regional transit. When you think about it, our wonderful interstate system, our road system, not only connected us, but helped accelerate the movement out of the city and really created what is a very large region that hasn't grown so much in population, it's just spread out. Regional transit, to me, is the opportunity to bring us back together in a very real way, to think regionally more and to succeed as a region. And that's why I think it's so important that we get behind this. Thank you very much.